Hi everyone, welcome back to another business analysis video. In today's video, we'll be exploring ambiguous requirements. As business analysts, one of the key things that we do in our job is to elicit, gather, document requirements from various stakeholders within the organization, right? But sometimes when you're gathering these requirements and understanding the point of view, the various perspectives of these stakeholders, you could, in many circumstances, in many times, as business analysts, we would come across ambiguous requirements. But what exactly do I mean by ambiguous requirements? Ambiguous refers to something that is unclear, something that is not easy to understand, something that is uncertain, and it's open to more interpretation. And as business analysts, when we are gathering and documenting requirements, we need to make sure it's clear, it's understood, because we are trying to create something from that requirement, right? So if something can be misunderstood in multiple ways and it's not clear which interpretation of that requirement is the correct one, it's considered ambiguous. And when you think about it, this can apply to language, it can apply to action, symbols, designs, so many various things around the type of communication or representation of what that is you're trying to say, really. So in order for us to prevent confusion and misunderstandings, there are things we need to do as business analysts in order to manage these ambiguous requirements and make them clear and just have one meaning. So before we look at that, let's look at an example of an ambiguous requirement. You can have a requirement that the system must load quickly. Now, how would you interpret that in your own point of view? What do you mean by quickly? Does it mean 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 minutes? This can mean different things in different perspectives. This requirement is ambiguous because it doesn't really specify what quickly means, right? It's open to interpretation, and different people may have different definition of quick. What does that mean? So let's make that a non-ambiguous requirement, that the system must load quickly. A better way to represent this is to ask, when you're doing your requirements elicitation, what do you mean by quickly? How often do you want it? When do you want it to load by? And in what section within the system is whatever it is loading? So this direct or ambiguous requirements has a lot of questions that the business analyst can work through in order to uncover what the main key requirement is. So that requirement would be, the system must load. What are we loading? Example, the system must load the user homepage within 2 seconds under normal network conditions, right? So that's one way to represent that requirements to be non-ambiguous. And you can see that the requirements is clear, it's specific, it specifies that the system must load that user homepage within that 2 seconds, and it provides that measurable goal. And then the phrase under normal network conditions, it also helps to provide that context and expectations about the performance under that standard operating condition of the system. As a result, this really leaves less room for misinterpretation, and it provides a clear goal for the developers to aim for, because as business analysts, we're passing these requirements on to the developers. If you just pass on an ambiguous requirements, how are they going to create whatever it is that they're creating? How, as business analysts, when we come across these sort of requirements, how do we effectively handle them? So here are some strategies that you can use. Number one, clarify and validate the requirements. As business analysts, one of the key skills that you need is ability to communicate effectively, both written and verbally, right? So engage in that active communication with your stakeholders to clarify and validate their requirements, going back and forth until you get it. Please, okay? You need to ask probing questions to gain deeper understanding of their needs as well as their expectation, and then you also obviously need to document this, and you need to seek that confirmation to ensure clarity. Confirm with them and make sure that they sign off, so that you have that proof that it's been signed off and clarified and validated. Number two, another strategy to effectively handle ambiguous requirements is to prioritize the requirements. Which one is more important, so that you can in effect, clarify and validate. So you want to work with your stakeholders to prioritize the requirement based on criticality and the impact on the success of the project. And you do this by focusing on the high priority requirements first, and then you can reduce any ambiguity and address crucial aspects of the project. That's one other way. But everything, all the strategies I'm giving, it has to do with communication with your stakeholders, right? The third one is taking that iterative approach to your requirements gathering and analysis by breaking down the complex requirements into smaller manageable pieces. This really, really works well in agile environment. In that you have your highest level epic, which is sort of ambiguous because you still need further details, and then you break in your epics into user stories, which are still quite high level because they literally will just define who the user is, what they want, and why they want it. But then the acceptance criteria breaks it down even further, thereby allowing you to avoid that ambiguous requirement, right? Make it clearer. You want to gather feedback and iterate on the requirements throughout the project life cycle to continuously refine and enhance the clarity of that requirement. A fourth strategy is to use prototyping and mock-ups. Sometimes when gathering requirements that refer to certain areas of the system, right, that refer to pictures, really, you want to have prototypes or mock-ups. You want to have screenshots. By creating those prototypes, visual representation of the proposed solution so that you can facilitate the discussion and validate the requirements. Because if you just have the system must load quickly, sometimes it's difficult to draw out the exact requirements from the stakeholder if you don't have a pictorial representation, for example, of the home page, and sort of explore how they feel with if the home page loads 5 seconds, 7 seconds, how does it make them feel? Let's explore these areas. Maybe 2 seconds might be a best way to ensure that the system loads, right? It's continuous collaboration and feedback as well within these strategies that I'm sharing with you. So doing these prototypes, mock-ups, visual representation, it would help your stakeholder to better visualize their needs, and it provides that opportunity to identify and resolve any ambiguities early on in the process. Now, the fifth and final strategy is to document and trace, right? Documentation and traceability of these requirements that you're capturing, validating, right? Make sure it's documented. You need to maintain a thorough documentation of the requirements, including where they have come from, their origin, the rationale why these requirements has come about, and any other associated discussions. You probably have a section in your documentation that would have comments and additional notes, right? And you want to establish that traceability between the requirements, between the project objectives and the business goals, so that you ensure that alignment and enable easier management of any changes that could come from that documentation of the requirement. So these are the top 5 strategies for handling ambiguous requirements. I hope that they've sort of helped. I hope that my examples also help you to really understand how we kind of come across ambiguous requirements and the things that you can do to help you to make sure that your requirements are clear. As always, thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, share this content. You never know who it might help. And I'll see you in my next one. Peace.